All right.
I'd like to.
Sounds so rude.
All right, we're going to start now. I'd like to call the meeting of Lebanon School Board to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Public comment will occur during the public comment portion of the meeting and is done by raising your hand remotely or in person. During public comment, once acknowledged, please state your name and boards that can be included in the minutes, and please limit your time to 3 minutes. Public comment is governed by policy BEDH. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? There is one addition to the chair. And we'll do this at the end of new business. We're adding a discussion of legislative items led by Tia and Mary. So we just add that as J for new business.
I think you also need to add, so we're doing the minutes for August 23rd, because they're not, that's actually not under.
Okay.
Microphone's on, right?
The microphones are on, but they're just for the outside, they're not for us. So we just have to talk loud. So I will talk louder. So we also need to add, where should we add it? Let's add that under 7.
7.
So 7, before we do 7A, we need to do another. 7A is to approve the minutes for our last August 23rd meeting. And then we'll approve nominations to 7B. Does that make sense? Everyone? All right. Is there any public comment in the room? Seeing none. Is there any public comment on Zoom? There is not. All right, we will reopen public comment at the end of the meeting. So public comment is closed for now. I do not believe we have a student report tonight. So we will move on to correspondence.
There was none.
There was none, thank you. Which moves us on to our consent agenda. So first we will need a motion to approve the August 23rd meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the August 23rd, 2023 Lebanon School Board meeting minutes.
And second?
I'll second
Okay.
Mary.
Motion made by MJ, seconded by Mary. Are there any corrections, additions, deletions to the minutes? MJ has a few.
So under number 4, correspondence, it says Mary informed the board there is one letter in reference to the, it should say mask, not math. All at correspondence. And then under 5B, we just need to change it. I believe the motion was made and then the discussion happened, so just kind of reverse order it.
What number was that under?
5B.
5B, motion, then discussion.
Correct.
Thank you.
And then under 5A, the motion was actually seconded by Mary Eads, not Wendy.
The last.
Oh, yeah,
The
that's
last
okay.
motion under.
Got it.
Yeah, but that's it.
Are there any other corrections? No? All right, thank you all. All right, and all those in favor, please raise your hands. Okay, that is, we're abstaining, okay, and.
Oh, sorry.
All right, so that's 7 in favor and 2 abstentions. All right, now we'll move on to 7A, approve nominations, renominations. Do we have any resignations and retirements? I didn't see anybody in the packet. Okay, so we're moving past that. There were none of those. All right, brings us to presentation by Katie Roach, Mount Lev principal.
Oh, hi. Welcome to Mount Lev, everyone. It's so exciting to have you guys here. I think you're just wanting kind of a recap on how the year started, right? Which would be great. It's been a wonderful 17, now we even in 17 days. This is our maybe not full school days. It's been fun. It's been busy. We have a lot of new students that moved in over the summer, a lot of fourth graders. Thank you guys for supporting the additional teacher. Our classes are full and busy. We love the renovation. We don't have our round cafeteria tables that we budgeted for, so we borrowed our old ones back, and I know why we budgeted for round tables. I think it will really hopefully help with the noise in here, but we're working with the students to have restaurant voices. As you can see, we have it posted, and we added it to our recess orientation. So we're working on the flow of the cafeteria. We call it our MLS cafe. So we're working on the flow to get the students through the line and as much time as we can to eat lunch. So it's been nice. Our first and second graders eat lunch in here. Kindergarten eats in their class, and it's pretty full. And then our third and fourth grade classes eat in here. So I think we're figuring out some kinks that will change next year with our schedule, but that's to be expected. So yes.
One thing,
Oh, Sing's going to be in the afternoon, but we're not having. It's not every week. The staff agreed to 2 a month, and this next Friday is our first one with families. So I sent it out in my newsletter that people can attend. We'll see how it goes, but we're going to have it's going to be in the afternoon at 2:15.
Does anybody else have any other questions for Kathy?
Oh, let me get out my little note, just because we just updated it today. I look at it all the time on our new ALMA system. Our current, as of today, it's 253 students. As of today.
So how are people responding to the difference in the food now that it's actually cooked here?
I believe they all really like it. Dawn, our new cafe service cook here, comes out every day and talks to the students and asks them like what they think of either the quesadillas or the macaroni and cheese, and
they're having more variation in what they're offered?
Well, so that's
Or that it's hot when they get to eat it?
it's hot. When they get to eat it. How about that? It's hot. Actually, I will say the first couple of days they were even like, these trays are warm, because normally it's all cold. So it's been really nice for her to be able to modify as needed. Like when there were nachos last week, one student wanted nachos but couldn't have the meat on it, and so she was able to fix it, which was really nice to have. So they seem really positive. They're back served on trays, so it all seems good. Yeah. Any other questions? It's been great.
Took a small tour of the renovations.
Yeah.
They look amazing.
Yeah.
The nurse's space looks great. The kitchen looks amazing. This room
Look at the
looks
view.
great.
It's beautiful.
It
Isn't it pretty?
is so much lighter and brighter. So we're happy that this has worked out and that you all are enjoying the benefits of it.
We are. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. No more questions? Any questions? No.
you match with your sit down.
Purposeful. These happen to be my favorite colors. That's why it's easier.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that moves us on to the SAU leadership team update. So we'll start with the superintendent's update.
Sure. Good evening. I am pleased to share we had a great start to the 2023-2024 school year. On our opening day for staff, I was joined by our board chair and several students of the Lebanon School District representing all 4 of our schools. Our students spoke to our faculty about their personal experience and how important the impact of a teacher can be. It was a great morning honoring our tenured faculty and center our students as they are the focus of our work. We are currently recruiting paraprofessionals. We have several special ed paraprofessional vacancies that are required to fulfill our obligations of the Individual with Disabilities Act. Karen and the HR team are working on recruitment tools and looking at our existing staffing to see if we need to make potential shifts to cover our students. Our construction projects at Lebanon High School and Hanover Street Elementary School are ongoing. If you drive by there, you'll see a foundation is poured. The walls are being built, so it's a really exciting time for both schools. In our meeting with the construction team, we are discussing how to limit any disruptions to the school day, especially as testing is coming up. Our leadership team has been present in all of the schools during the first week, supporting the needs of each building, and this has been very well received from all the schools. The crosswalk at the middle school continues to be a concern. Lebanon Middle School will have a staff at the crosswalk during drop-off and pickup. In addition, calls have been made to the State Highway Department, and a meeting is scheduled with the Lebanon Police Department. On September 11th, Caitlin Jones joined our IT department as our applications coordinator. She brings a wealth of information and experience in the technology instruction and leadership departments. The IT department has one remaining vacancy, which they will be interviewing in the near future. I'd like to acknowledge and thank our facilities team who brought and delivered additional fans to all of our classrooms during our heat wave. It was much appreciated. And finally, I would like to thank our bus drivers and transportation department for their smooth transition and their flexibility. Any questions?
I just did have some questions around the heat wave and conditions in classrooms and like looking forward, if this is going to be the long-term solution or if there are ideas around that. I think I've heard 3 of the 4 schools have central air conditioning, is that correct?
They have in certain spots in their, within their building. So the library at the middle school, for example, is air conditioning. Offices have air conditioning spaces, but there's no widespread central air in the buildings.
Just wonder if that's something we're going to have to consider.
I mean, I don't know if Steve wants to go up. Steve's been working, fielding lots of calls for me. Steve, he literally probably bought out every fan in the Upper Valley. His team and our team were checking rooms and checking temperatures consistently and moving classrooms where possible. So today, I talked to teachers at Hanover Street. They told me their 4th grade classrooms were relocated to the library, which was air conditioned. But I think the age of the building certainly is something to consider when you're looking at installing central air for the buildings. I don't know if you have any questions for.
How were the conditions? I just don't, like, how hot was it in classrooms?
It was uncomfortable, no question about it. Some of the parking lot sensors were showing 100+ degrees, but that's outside of the pavement areas. Classrooms were approaching the upper 80s, certainly. Closing the windows, keeping the heat out during the day was a help, obviously, and then those classrooms facing roofs. Temperature of the roof could be 140 degrees, pulling the shades, keeping the sun out, anything we could do to keep it out. My PM crew custodians, I asked them that just as soon as the sun set, windows open, fans in, let's super cool at night. Close up in the morning, so it was a process. Was it uncomfortable? Absolutely.
Do we have an idea of like what is the max temperature at which it's safe for?
I don't know if there's one set temperature that it is unsafe. We certainly made sure that people were staying hydrated and looking at rooms and spaces. So if there was a space that had air conditioning, that students were being rotated in there.
I have a question. So are heat pumps probably a more likely answer for getting AC in the old buildings? Is that what the board might be faced with in the future?
So heat pumps will be a good retrofit option, no question about it. I caution that the school board puts heat and air conditioning into those heat pumps.
Okay.
When you get above the 40th parallel, basically mass line, the efficiency significantly drops off with the heating pump.
Right, right, yeah, on the super cold days, it's not as helpful. Okay.
I don't want to arbitrarily throw out a number, but to cool our schools, we're talking millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think it's relevant to bring up, this is really more about heat, but we are just 6 years into an 18-year funded energy project where we upgraded our heating which is not cooling, but we have a long way to go before we pay that lease payment off. So it's in the budget every year, so just keep that in mind. We put in brand new boilers. That's kind of your point, is that we have boilers, we don't have forced hot air, so air conditioning is a separate equation, either heat pumps or something in addition to what we have, unless you wanted to rip out everything we just did.
Well, I
you
just,
know.
I wasn't sure
Yeah.
what the answer to efficient cooling would be,
Yeah.
not just window units everywhere, necessarily what makes sense, and I don't have the full answer to that, because I've only looked at heat pumps for a house, so not as
I'm curious, where are all the fans gonna be stored?
In this new room.
On the stage.
That's
We could get creative with storage. There's shipping containers that are within the district. There's many sheds throughout the district. Ideally, we'd like to store them at the schools, so
Got it.
when we need to deploy them, it's quick doing so.
Any other questions for Steve or the superintendent?
So a high vis vest of some kind?
I did
Okay.
speak to them,
Okay.
and they needed to wear high visible vest, and I actually spoke to the deputy chief through our SRO, who said they absolutely should be wearing those vests during pickup and drop off.
They were today, so I saw
Okay.
a student running to bring it to one of them, so they forgot it on their way, and so a student brought them the high vis vest, and they put it on right after school started, so
Perfect.
they have it. So, I had a question about the paraeducators. Have we had any interest in people for the teacher training program of paras?
Absolutely. Karen Woolsey and her team have been meeting with the paraprofessionals. We have a lot of interest from our existing paraprofessionals, which we hope we can turn around as a part of a recruitment tool for other paraprofessionals. But I think there was 24 to 25 paraprofessionals who are interested in that program, paraprofessional teacher pipeline. That's great.
So I have a question, just a little bit off topic, but some of our neighboring towns and down south have been having a lot of issues with transportation and buses. We're in good shape and we're not gonna be hit with people complaining about long route times or no routes at all.
Well, I make no predictions on what we're gonna get with complaint-wise, but I talked to Paul about this just the other day. We are in much better shape than last year. We've got at least 4 drivers over the summer of different capacities. They're not all like route drivers, but, last week, somebody asked me, like, are we doing like a K to 12 route? We're not anymore, according to Paula. So we have enough drivers for that. The board has compensated the drivers well, and we've actually hired some drivers away from some of our competitors in the area. So
No.
we feel like we're doing
We're responsible.
It's a dog-eat-dog world. I think we're doing well, way better than last year.
Oh, that's great.
Any other questions? Okay, that's great.
I'm going to pass these out. These are the 2023-24 COVID protocols. This following information was provided by the Lebanon School District nurses. The Lebanon School District is following CDC guidelines for COVID-19, similar to last year, school year 22-23. Staff and students will follow these guidelines. One should isolate after testing positive for COVID. One should isolate if COVID symptoms develop and one has not tested. Should one test positive, we will stay at home and isolate for 5 days from the onset of symptoms or positive test results. And they'll wear a mask from day 6 to day 10. So this information will be distributed from the nurses to the schools.
Should sounds like a recommendation. Is it a policy or is it a recommendation?
This is the protocol that this board had from the board from last year that was shared with the nurses. I'm not sure if it was mandated, if that's the language we would like to switch it to.
No, I'm I'm not advocating one or the other, I just want to understand what it is. So if the nurse tells a parent, your child should stay home, and the parent says, well, do they have to stay home?
Yes, if they have tested positive, they should, yes.
So this is the policy, it's not a
Policy.
recommendation.
So are we requiring them, if they have symptoms, to test?
No.
Nor are we requiring a negative test to return.
Right, I knew that, that makes sense. So if somebody has symptoms and hasn't tested, so if we don't require testing, how are we gonna know?
I believe last year was the self-report of the families.
But we'll allow a kid in school unmasked with symptoms of COVID without testing?
They would
Well,
have to
because-
isolate if they had COVID symptoms.
Okay.
Okay,
Do we have a
this is,
description?
I mean, I guess this is where things get a little fuzzy, because COVID symptoms are everything. It's a runny nose, it's I mean, like, and so are we really, is what we're saying, any kid who has a runny nose, if they don't have a negative test, you have to go home? Or are we simply saying, like, I am, what are we saying? I guess that's not what we mean as a parent.
So are you asking for a description of those symptoms that we're looking for?
I'm asking for us to clarify the hardness of that expectation of testing whenever there are COVID symptoms.
Yeah.
What was the
Yes,
clarity that
sorry,
was
I guess
provided,
I'm asking.
what was the clarity that was provided last year that was agreed upon?
I mean, it was not mandated
No.
to test. I think, I mean, there were some basic guidelines. I thought, you know, the fever, the vomiting, that you absolutely had to stay home. I'm not sure where we were on the sniffles or a headache. We definitely didn't have, at the end of the year, we did not have mandatory testing for those.
Well, in the nurse's office, you're told that if your child has a fever, that they have to be fever-free for 24 hours before they can return to school. So that's like, everybody knows that, that's what they tell you, come and get your kid, can't come back until that.
I think that what was happening here with COVID is, this is if a child is exhibiting COVID symptoms to the extent that they go to the nurse's office, right? So that they are sick, right? That they're sick enough, whatever it is, whatever symptoms they have, they go to the nurse's office. Now, if those symptoms, when the child comes to the nurse's office, if this is COVID symptoms, so not because of a vomiting, but because of something else, then at that point, they would probably be isolating, and she would be, I would assume, they would be contacting the parents. But again, I don't think this is just like you're saying, it's not just the sniffles, it's when someone presents with illness that is stopping them from doing their normal school day, then the nurses are gonna go through their list of symptoms of things, right? And they have all the things that they approach, like, do you need Tylenol, do you need Motrin, do you need, et cetera, does it seem like you have COVID? At that point, then it would be up to the nurses what they do at that point. Because we haven't stipulated here that they do anything.
So the nurses, will they be able to test for COVID in the building? Okay. I know in Vermont they do, but I haven't heard anything in New Hampshire.
We did last year.
We did last year.
But I haven't heard anything this year.
We did last year, but we're not this year.
Correct.
Well, the tests, yeah, because the tests were all free last
Yeah.
year, right?
Right.
Now we have to stock up on the tests.
So that's not answering your question.
I'm just calling out what I see as
No.
potential, like, things that may come up. I don't,
Were there issues last year with this and?
No, I mean, I think that's because the nurses are, when they're calling parents, they're saying, these are all the things that your child is having, these are things that are happening, and this is what we're doing. Is that what you want us to do, or would you like to come get your child? Now, go ahead.
So I'm trying to sort of play these scenarios out too.
Right.
So my kid goes to the nurse's office. There's COVID going around in the schools, has been exposed. Even slight symptoms might be indicated. I asked to come home, to come pick him up, whatever. So if I, as the parent, say, I'm not gonna test him, he doesn't have a fever, it could just be a cold, I'm gonna send him to school tomorrow without a mask.
Yeah, I mean, I think
That's
that's what we're saying, because we can't do anything beyond
But
that.
if the child feels ill enough to need to be picked up, probably they're gonna be ill enough the next day to stay home.
But we're right, it's up to the parents to
Right.
decide.
The
Because
parents.
we don't have any, there's not an emergency situation in place now, we don't have it.
And we can't enforce the isolation.
But I guess that this is the exact same policy, right, that was in place for at least the second half of the school year last year, and we didn't have any major problems with it, letting the nurses triage and handle it, so I get that this gray area, I completely understand that, but I also think that the policy has worked in light of any other guidance from the CDC
Or DHA.
or DHHS, not that.
I mean, I guess we may just need to just sort of recognize that, like, if something changes in terms of the circumstances of the Upper Valley and the world, then we may need to
So
visit.
perhaps, I mean, the thing that we've run into, and we've run into this in the past, right, is that we are to some capacity, and there's been some wiggle room in that. We are to a great extent dictated by what DHHS has decided and what the governor has declared, right? Like we are sort of limited in what we can and cannot do, even as an independent school board. And that last year was one of our problems. We wanted to go longer than the governor allowed, right? And there were threats of suing and all of this, and we did, and everything was fine, and we weren't sued. But it's a weird area of, if there hasn't been an emergency declaration, if there hasn't been a change at the state level, then what we do locally is in a lot of ways circumscribed.
That's fine, I just think, I feel like just being clear that, from my own self, but I think for the board, that like this is effectively just a set of recommendations. This is not actually really.
Which is all that we have at stake.
Which is
right?
fine, I'm sort of just making sure we're all understanding this the same way, that is really what this is.
And I think just to tag on that, what the nurses have done in the past, which I think would also be great, to socialize the recommendations, and they're usually, they put a little nurses corner in all of the school newsletters,
Yeah.
so that people know, and that also helps people say, well, you know what, maybe I should do the right thing for the community, test my kid and make sure it's not COVID. I mean, not everyone's gonna go down that, but at least it's putting it in people's minds to think about it before they send their kid back to school. That's what they did last year, it seems to have been effective, so.
I mean, we are seeing in the community COVID and RSV all
Yes.
climbing,
Yes.
right? And that's gonna continue to climb through the fall into the winter. And symptoms are not horribly different between the two. So I think you're gonna see a lot of kids that, have symptoms with no test. And then we're saying, well, what do we do with those kids?
And we do nothing because we can't do anything.
Well, but there are things that, I mean, in theory, just like, what we could do some things that aren't requirements. For example, like, we could find a way to do sort of as the library is doing, and have a big pile of COVID tests that are free, that are available from the school. We want, like, I guess it just feels important to me to recognize that if all we're doing is recommendations, fine, but we do have the ability to make resources available that would encourage or support people in testing themselves, because I think that you can, I don't know how everybody else's experience, but with small kids in daycare, I was spending hundreds of dollars regularly on COVID tests before everybody was handing them out for free, so I think that there is some burden that's possible. If we wanted at some point to alleviate that, we could point our noses at that.
You could imagine that we equip the school nurse with a stock of tests, that when she's calling the parent saying, hey, your child's got all these symptoms, I can test them if you'd like. And then we know for sure what to do with the kid.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to look into how much it's gonna cost us, right? Because we have no idea, because we haven't ever bought them ourselves.
Thank you for asking that.
I know that.
Using them largely for free for large organizations.
Yeah, we just have to look into it, we just don't know, we've never explored that, but we can, certainly. I agree, I mean, I think you're right, both of you, that it would encourage people to either test their child, or to take the test and do it themselves, or have their child tested by the nurse. I think that's all.
Or send their child home.
Or send the child home with one, yeah. I think that's totally a viable solution if we can get the test, so we just have to look into that.
I also, just to be clear, I feel like that's up to the to me, that some sort of feels like it's in the school's courts, and they're like, let's just say if we wanted to do something.
I also want to confer with our school nurses who have been working with us for many years, and to see where they're at with that and what sort of opinion they can weigh in, and we can certainly bring that back to the next meeting.
Do you have any sense of what our current state is as far as teachers and students with COVID?
I do not. I just from the Upper Valley, I've heard that there are several cases of COVID.
Are we having any, because Sawyer's indicating he has 3 of his teachers out currently. So are we having any staffing?
We're not having any staffing issues per se at specific buildings that have been reported at all at this point.
And from an HR perspective, we do not track, nor will we track if someone is positive or not. So if they're out because of COVID, the only way anybody knows that is if they've told someone.
No, I know, but I know in the past we've had concern about not having enough substitutes and stuff like that to cover outages for COVID and whatever else might come up. And so it sounds like we're already using our substitutes.
Well, another positive is that we've had a lot of substitutes this fall.
Oh,
Thank
great.
you to the board for raising it.
Good work, Tim.
Not me.
Must feel a lot better. You have what you need, right?
All right, any other comments or questions about this, Superintendent? All right, so that will move us on to the business administrator's update.
Good evening. So what we've done in the past, and we're going to do at least this year too, is we've started kind of some subjects to talk about budget-wise through the month of September and October leading up to budget. So this is the first of those presentations, and the only difference from the past is that I wrote this saying it's estimated because I've not finished the DOE 25 yet, way further along than I was a week ago when I did these slides. But it's, hopefully I'll have that done by Friday is my goal. But these numbers still hold. I wrote this knowing that this is where we're headed. So the unassigned fund balance that will be reported under DOE 25, that will go to be reported and therefore come off your overall tax bill, will be around $1.9 million. Looks like we're going to be just under that. Warrant Article 2 from the budget article last year assumed mandated, I wrote mandated, so when you present the budget during the deliberative session and you said the budget's going to be, I don't even remember now, $25 per thousand, that was assuming there was $1 million contribution from the end of last year to reduce taxes. So what I'm saying is that there's another $900,000. So that means that your taxes, the school portion of your taxes will be probably 33 cents lower than advertised when you had the budget approved last year. You say, hey, please approve this budget. Your tax rate's going to be this. It should be 33 cents from the school side lower. I don't know what the rest of your tax bill is going to be. The new assessment, just so you know, the new assessed number for the town, when we did the budget last year, the total assessed value of the town was about 2.2 billion. Now it went up to I was looking yesterday, the other day, it's up to 2.7 billion. So I tell you that to think, when you're thinking budget, the real pretty accurate but quick and easy way to think of that is knock zero off the end. So if it's $2.7 billion worth of stuff in the city, that means any action you do that's 2.7 million is $1 on your tax rate. So when you're thinking about how can we save $1 off the budget, you'd have to shave $2.7 million. So just keep it in your head. I'll go over that 100 times during budget season. The next slide, just sort of, these are not all the categories, but some main categories, again, following last year's sort of pattern. In money that was not spent last year, about just under $400,000 in wages, about $660,000 in benefits, and about $173,000 in tuition. That's all tuition. That's not necessarily special ed or regular ed. Mostly special ed, but there's a little regular. We budget $100,000 of regular ed tuition for the Ledyard Charter School, and I think last year we spent $80,000, for example. So a little bit of this regular ed. A lot of those wage numbers and benefits numbers, we were, as you know, we were quite short-staffed, especially in support staff and paraprofessionals, custodians, and maintenance last year, and bus drivers. We have some para vacancies, but as Amy alluded to, but I think we started last year with something like 17 vacancies, and we have a few now, like under 5. We are full on custodians. I think we're debating down, we're still down a maintenance guy. Someone just indicated that he's gonna be resigning soon, not out of the bed. But, so we're down a little bit still on staff, but way better. So a lot of this balance that you saw this year, you're not gonna see in this year's budget. It's actually for someone who's been here 10 years with numbers that are big. I was doing a preliminary check the other day, and it's like, ooh, never been so tight. So it's gonna be way different this year. So I think that's good. The next slide, I started this graph a bunch of years ago, just trying to show you the unassigned fund balance history from 2007 to now. And I think this is relevant because of that 1.9, that's not just unexpended funds, that's also extra revenue. It all gets mushed together, and that's the number that goes back against offset taxes. And so that last chart there, I think yours is black and white, but the top part of it is supposed to be green. Of the 1.9 million, about 445,000 is extra revenue. We had once again, we had a big impact fee from the city. We have $217,000 check we got from the city for impact fees. The way it works is if you don't budget, whatever you don't budget on revenues has to go back to offset taxes. So we have historically, we had one other year, 2 years ago, that's the 2021 chart, where we had a high impact fee contribution. But if you, when you do the revenues, we're gonna say these are your projected revenues. If you project you're gonna get $200,000 in impact fees and you don't, then the rest of that gets made up in local taxes. So the more conservative approach is to budget something that's more normal. I don't have the revenue budget with me, but I think we usually budget 50,000. And when we get a big check, it does give you a bigger fund balance, but at least you're not anticipating revenue you don't get. There's no, the city did change the impact fee law or regulation, so all that means for the district is that the way it was worded before was that the money could only go for the middle school, and now it can be used across the district. So it kind of 6 of one, half of it together, because we don't use it only for the middle school, we use it to offset the bond payment in the middle school. So it's kind of an exercise in sort of policy more than practice. So we did get a big impact fee check, and I've asked them several times, like, how do we know if we're gonna get a big impact fee? And I don't think that they're stonewalling. There's just no way to predict. It really has to do when buildings get built and things get approved and whatever that process is. The other piece of from New Hampshire retirement, we got 224,000, and this goes, think back, last year, there was a one-time reduction or state payment to New Hampshire retirement for 7% of your certified staff, meaning teachers, to the New Hampshire retirement. So they didn't make the payment though to New Hampshire retirement, and therefore reduce our expenses, which is what I would have preferred. Instead, they reimbursed the districts. So this time last year, we were deciding what to do. You could either reduce your revenue projection, or you can carry it through to the end of the year. So we carried it through to the end of the year. Again, it has the same effect. Either your taxes were lower last fall or they're lower this fall. And I think we made the right decision considering everybody's tax rates went up after the budget season was set. So long and short of it is a significant portion, about $500,000 of the fund balance, well, I said in the first page, $600,000 of the fund balance was extra revenue. Those two numbers I gave you together are 442. The rest of it was, we got a little bit more tuition from Grantham and Plainfield than we expected, a little bit more Medicare than we expected. And you'll see those details further in the budget, but these two are the big two pieces of it, $600,000. Any questions about anything I presented? The last slide is just like what our next steps are. I'll go over that, I guess, while you're thinking.
Tim,
Right
can I just
now-
ask a quick question?
I'm sorry.
So when do you have, so the revenue projections as part of the budget, like when do you get an idea that we may get more revenue? So is there a way, like if we know when we're doing budget,
Yep.
before the ballot is set, that we could lower, say like the $1 million, do you know, so like it nets out to $1 million, but
So, as you know, I don't know if we spend enough time on revenues, maybe we need to spend more as part of our budget process, but most of the numbers in the budget, the non-tax revenue budget, are numbers that are real local controlled, but, so for like tuition, we're usually pretty accurate on tuition, so I get from the different schools how many kids are coming here, and I know the rate for tuition based on the area agreement, and the numbers you get are the best accurate. You know, obviously Plainfield and Grantham they're not always accurate, they get a couple more students or whatever. The state stuff, the adequacy aid, the special ed aid, all those state numbers come out, and they give me a spreadsheet on the 1st of December. I think it's the 1st of December, they give you a spreadsheet, these are what the numbers are. And that's, I mean, usually it's accurate, but last year, the legislature passed a law that was based on some numbers that were not, that were based on the end of the school year that just ended. So after, the law was in effect, but they could not calculate what the new revenue would be until the year closed. So the short answer is that when we talk revenue, it's as accurate as I think we can be at the time, unless you want to budget more for impact fees, for example. But the numbers from the state, it's pretty foolish to not go off the spreadsheet they give you. All these different categories from the state come from the Department of Revenue and the Department of Education. And sometimes they change, but it's usually because of legislation, and they give us the numbers in time for budget if they can.
yeah, the trick is like if it pops up if it's much above, like it's almost double if we're at 1.9, right?
Yeah.
So if you're saying the budget's tighter this year, we know then there's $1 million, like their taxes are gonna be affected by $1 million not going back. And that's
Yeah.
always a tricky,
And you've been around long enough to know that we've had this discussion, so $1 million is a high number. When I first got here, it was $250,000, meaning that's what the budget was assumed. And some people on the board wanted to raise it to $1 million because you always had more than that, which I understand. But it's kind of like you get addicted to a substance, because now we're used to setting a budget based on $1 million being going back. And anytime there's less than it, well, we set the warrant articles that the capital reserve fund won't be funded unless there's $1 million going back. So if we only have $700,000 going back at the end of the year, this is just for instance.
but I'm just saying, like, so if taxpayers are seeing an offset of 1.9, you know, because I think it used to be higher than $1 million, and then we ratcheted it down to $1 million, and we've just sort of stayed there.
No,
But
it went the other way. On the warrant, it went from 250 when Jim Fenn was here
Oh, interesting.
up to $1 million.
Because we always
more.
had huge.
Right.
Right, so what was going, yeah.
But if you have,
But like,
if next year we have $800,000 going back, it's gonna look like there's a $1 million tax increase.
right,
That's
without
the
us
issue.
even
Right.
talking about our budget.
Correct.
I have a question. So the $600,000 is the excess revenue. The
Yeah.
million is what we plan on giving back to the taxpayer always. It's always written in terms of it. What is the extra $300,000 from unexpended?
There was
appropriations?
instead of $1 million left, there was 1.3 million left.
Right.
When everything was settled.
Okay.
Right.
And that has to do with all of the
It's just we didn't
tuition
spend.
and whatever.
Yeah,
we
right,
didn't
right.
spend. That's what I mean. Like, where did that come from is my question.
that's-
It's coming from the things that we didn't spend.
Correct.
So because that's things that we didn't spend, but that were in the budget,
Mhm.
and because we've agreed to give $1 million back,
Mhm.
does that 300,000 automatically have to go back? Like
Correct.
the 600,000, it all
Correct.
automatically has to go
Right.
back?
The $1 million number is, you guys have agreed to it, but that's nothing, the DRA, like you're not required to by the DRA.
Yeah, thank you.
So we're looking to do the budget with the principals and Amy and me and the rest of us on the week of October 16th, so the budget has been opened up for business. Katie and her crew are doing their thing. And then guys don't know this, but we're looking for October 23 to 27. Those are dates that we're gonna try to put together with your building, so we're reaching out to say, hey, what works for you within that week? So that's for your purpose, so look at your schedules on that week and see when you're available.
And we can send that to you sooner than later.
Yep, anytime you want.
And the goal is for us to have that budget in our hands prior to our meeting, and how much prior to our meeting?
Well, I mean, and
I mean, if you're not meeting with the principals until the 16th and the 20th, and we start to have meetings on the 23rd.
this is the same schedule as last year, so you would
Right.
have the first board meeting in November.
So I think what she's asking is the reps to the buildings, will we have,
Oh, you wanted something ahead of time?
yeah.
Yeah, we always do. We had this discussion last year too. Because it's hard to go into those meetings and say, tell me about your budget, but I've never seen.
That's the point, that's by design.
So that seems like kind of a pointless exercise to me. So if we could see something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want to move that back, or if you want me to try to give you,
Whichever, what's more realistic for you, I guess that's the question.
I mean, for the meeting on the 16th to the 20th, I will have a printout and some documents from that Amy will see, and unless there's, I don't think this is unreasonable is my point, unless Amy makes some radical change that's gonna cause, I mean, changing the number is pretty easy, once she says, we're not gonna spend $1 million on that, we're gonna give it to Tim instead.
Right.
So I think this will work, and I just need to remember to give you the documents that come out of that principals meeting.
Yeah.
And then you'll have like a week to look at it.
Well, no, because.
Well, no, because
the
we might
first
be meeting on the
meeting is
20th.
finished on the 20th, and our next meeting is on the 23rd.
Well,
so
hopefully it's the
somebody's gonna
person
have
that met on the
3 days.
16th, right? So the 23rd.
Well, I would assume that the person who meets with Amy on the 20th would meet with you sometime toward the end of the next week, that's where I was.
So can we have an idea of when, the schedule that you're meeting with what principals, so that we can then?
Yes.
Yes, that would be helpful, because then we can push ourselves to be a week away from whenever the meeting of our buildings is.
We cannot move the meeting with Amy up from the 16th.
No, that's fine.
Closer.
Yeah, it's just, I would strongly advocate for what Bill's suggesting.
I forgot.
When the building reps sit down at that meeting and they're handed a spreadsheet that has 1,800 lines, and they say, you know, hey, what do you think? I'm like, I don't know, I just got 1,800 lines put in front of me.
Well,
It's
It's
really
like
hard.
Rita O'Reilly, just sign and move on.
Yeah, we don't like to do that.
So, I mean, so it just it makes for a more useful conversation if everyone has some information.
And
Are
just-
you okay with like a week?
Yeah.
Yes, oh, yeah.
I think it's fine, and just so everyone knows who's new, the purpose, and this is what I understand, you can correct me if that's wrong. The purpose of these meetings for us to meet with the principals of the buildings that we're assigned to is so that we can understand their thinking behind their budgeting, and therefore we can be advocates for them on, or explanatory about their decision-making process when we're at the budget meeting. They'll be there as well, but it just helps us to have more people in the room who know what's happening at an individual building level. So it would be, again, it's helpful.
And
The more
even on
information
the
we
other
have.
side,
I
say, you
think-
know what, that makes no sense, you better come up with a better
No,
idea.
Right, and that's,
Yeah.
I mean, we go in with the board perspective and
Yes.
sort of understanding the conversations that we typically have, and we can ask those questions of the budget, and sort of at least get the principals thinking about those things, that those
So-
questions are likely gonna come up.
So is there a
If we have
reason
an
why
idea,
you
like-
can't be a week later then? Because the budget meeting happens usually, what, the Saturday before Thanksgiving? So that's like the third week in November, right? So why couldn't we just push it to the 28th to November 3rd or something like that?
What's the first week of
I'm-
November?
The only issue I have with that is getting you, if you want to, if I don't need to hand the budget books out on the very first meeting of the month, and rather can do it a week later off, outside the budget, then that's fine. But it takes a lot to compile all the books, so, finishing up 5 days before I have to give them to you that's gonna be more difficult than giving you materials a week ahead of time.
I would advocate for having the full binders sooner than a week later. So I
Do
think
you
if we
want, you want
just,
the full binders on the first board meeting?
You're saying, and that's the.
I'd rather have
ninth?
time with,
It's-
I mean, so I think if we know what the schedule is for the buildings, then we can just
Yeah.
set our.
Yeah, and if we need to move past the 27th on 1 or 2 or something, that'd be okay. I think if I know that I need to give you your materials a week early.
Yeah.
Before I can handle it.
even if it's several days at least.
More than 2.
Or the moment of.
Okay, does that make sense to everyone? Yes?
It's a good
Okay.
conversation, appreciate it.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Oh, you didn't ask your next step questions. Did you want to ask those?
Oh, we actually have a couple of things I meant to do, so.
Okay. We're not done with yours.
Next steps, yeah, I just want to know what you want to know. Start thinking about, what do you want to know about budget proposal, anything? Is there any specific information the board would like to have? Kind of talked about it a little bit, but I don't need answers now, but just start thinking in your head, like, what do you want to know in the budget that you didn't know last year? Or maybe you're new to the budget and you
I have one thing. With this new shelter that may be going in and possible, is it only for adults? The shelter that is
It's
being planned for
a
Lebanon?
warming shelter.
I guess I want to know what the implications for the schools are
It's a warming shelter, right? Is it
with that planning.
So there's no
What it
beds?
looks like.
It's an overnight shelter.
Overnight
Oh,
shelter.
overnight shelter, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's only 15 beds and it may be only adults. And if that is the case, then it won't affect us more than, yeah.
The one thing that I always ask for, and more because I'm sort of curious, like, I would love to see a section in the binders that's for athletics and co-curriculars.
Yes. And to, I mean, either
And
a
I don't-
separate section or at least in each individual school, that athletics and co-curriculars are separated out.
Yes, the middle school and high school.
Right.
I mean, they're already separated out. I
It's
guess
hard.
we can talk further about what kind of details you want. They're already separated out by separate functional areas. You can see what they're spending.
But it's all jumped into one, like it says athletics,
It's,
and that's a
It says
number.
athletic supplies, athletic coaches, co-curricular, wage line.
But remember we had this discussion, like, during this last discussion where we asked about specific sports and specific activities.
And what they cost. Yeah.
And what they cost, and.
So that's, you want some more detail from the high school's gonna have to provide a lot of that, but that's cool.
It's
I just would
available.
like to understand, and not because I'm thinking that I want to do something to our athletics and co-curriculars, but it just, to wrap my head around without having to like try to figure out.
During that discussion, when Mike and Ian were presenting that information, they said, oh, you should have, we can't give you these numbers because we don't have them in front of us, and you don't have them in front of you, and it would have been helpful if we just had the numbers, so I think.
Yeah, I
a little more
remember
detail.
that discussion.
Yeah.
And I think along with that, I think another big mystery is how all this individual like sports team fundraisers feed into the budget. So maybe kind of track what we do with the fundraising. Might mean that you told, oh, I'm fundraising for new sports equipment, but then there's the big question, did it really get spent? No one sees anything. So kind of how do we support our budget with our fundraising activities?
Well, I think that, good question. I think that, I guess a little bit behind the curtain, so that you certainly need to know all you need to know, but, so from a budgeting standpoint, the general fund is one thing that, those are called student activity funds. They are completely different. We don't talk about them during the budget season. The money is only used for that. And we have accounting for that. I think I know what you're looking for. You want some more information without, I'm not willing to
Well,
give you.
but some of
prints
that's
every
using to
invoice.
support our program, so how much are we not funding our program because it is being supported by
Yeah.
other avenues, but also be helpful
I get it,
information?
Two questions. One would be, what's the right way to ask questions as they come up? Do you, if something occurs to me in 2 days, should I email Amy? Should I email Tim? Should I save it for the next board meeting? How do you want information and questions to come into you? So that's question number one, but related question is question number two. As a new board member, I found the meeting that we had with you and the superintendent back in June or something, and the new board members came. I think everybody may have been invited, I don't remember, but it was a much more open meeting where we were just able to ask a lot of questions and just understand things and be a little bit stupid, not on full board time. I really, really valued that. It was incredibly helpful, and I don't know if anything like that is planned for the budget process, but if it's not, I would really appreciate it if we had an opportunity to have a meeting like that with even if it's just with you, Tim, or with you and the superintendent, whatever you guys wanted, that was incredibly valuable, and I felt like I would really appreciate something like that if we could.
Maybe not necessarily like specifics to the budget, but like how do you approach a budget binder? How do you,
Just a very, yeah.
like, it's more like a workshop, like budgeting
Let's just
workshop
talk.
101 for school boards versus, because I think we want to be careful in like having any back and forth conversations about the details of the budget.
This to me, what I'm thinking of, what I'm hoping for is really not about this specific year's budget.
Right.
But about budgets and how you think about them, how we think about them, what the right way to sort of talk about them as a team and a city. Like, I think it's a little more philosophical and high level to me, and so it, again, feels like the kind of thing that we could do it here. It just doesn't feel like a great use of everybody's time.
And maybe as an example, you just used last year to keep us safe. Just use last year's budget as the tool.
Sure, like, just.
We could all bring our
yeah,
binders.
if there's concerns about
Woo!
like something being inappropriate, like, I'm not trying to put a foot in that, really just trying to figure out like, how can we get ourselves up to speed so that new board, I think one of my concerns always is that I think new board members in any board situation can kind of, it can be treated as normal that for your first year, for a full third of your tenure, that you're somehow not very useful. And I don't think that that's an appropriate expectation. And so I just I'm perfectly excited to do the work to be a useful person. But need an opportunity to become useful.
So I think if you were willing to do something like that, again, this is, you're willing to do this or not, right? It's totally up
A
to you.
request.
A request, not a mandate. If you were willing to do something like that, I think we would want to say it's maybe just the new members. Once we have more than 5 of us in a room, it's a meeting and it's a problem. So we can say either we do it with just the new, or if others of us want it, we have a different time, or we video one that and someone else can watch it.
And as
or
their
something
mentor,
like,
I'm happy to.
right.
I mean,
As long as we
ensure-
don't have 5 of us in a room, that's all that I want us not to do.
Steve will have to give me back my old binders though. Still have them.
I mean, in theory, I'm certainly willing to do that. It really comes down to practice and time and
Yeah.
stuff, so we'll have to look. As far as when to let me know, I only made that face because I just know sometimes I get scatterbrained, so if you send me a question every day, I'm gonna lose it, I just know it. So maybe.
That's sort of why I thought this was a 2-part question. I'm like, I'd rather
Maybe
sit in
once
a room.
week is what you
I'd
mentioned.
rather just
All your
say,
questions
like,
in one
my
meeting.
questions.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Honestly, I think maybe once a week email or something, because I just know if you send
Well, I
me an
wonder if
office-
we can, I mean, does this violate any whatever, like, can we create a Google sheet or something like that where we can log questions and there's no back and forth, but at least we can all see sort of what each other is asking?
Yeah,
So we're not sending him 5 of the same questions?
That's a good idea,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
just legal.
Yeah, I think it is, as long as we don't, if we're not having back and forth discussion on it, and we're just putting questions in, that he has all the questions, and we can see that somebody else has already asked this, and we don't have to. And if you periodically answer the questions, then I think that's fine.
Or you just always answer them in public,
Yes, we can do that as well.
or send them through Amy?
So I have one other question, like.
He can
right
answer
now.
them, yeah, he can
Not
respond.
that you're gonna answer, but that maybe the people who are meeting with the city could zone in on is the revenue as it relates to the building. It seems like the people who are interfacing with the city should be able to, or should be asking those questions, like, so what's coming up on the docket? What are we getting ready to
As far
have
as impact fees,
cleared?
I mean,
Pardon?
as far as impact fees that they anticipate.
Yeah, the impact.
It could be a good question, maybe during whenever the next meeting is, like, listen, we're doing our budget. Do you have any idea what the impact fees will be for 24, 25 years?
Yeah, because there
Because if
is
they
a
have
bunch
any,
of
we could do
building
budget.
on the
Yeah.
slate, I know for certain that's coming up. so.
That next meeting is October 26th.
That would be perfect timing.
And who, I guess, so I'm on that committee, and Wendy
Yeah.
and
I think Kevin too.
Kevin, oh, that's right. But Amy also attends those meetings,
Mhm.
right? who chairs them?
Sean.
Sean is officially the chair. So I guess,
Conflict of interest.
But we get to set the agenda with him.
who's we there? Because
Amy.
last time we didn't participate at all in the setting of the agenda.
That particular, but I think,
And we only meet twice a year, so.
yeah, historically, I think the superintendent would meet with Sean and would bring the board's sort of concerns
Yeah.
and make sure that they're addressed in the agenda.
Okay.
So if you
So-
have
Yes,
concerns,
yeah, concerns, talk to her, because that'll be on the, she's gonna make the agenda, so we can talk to her about what.
Okay,
what's
so
on the agenda.
to the board, like to the extent that there are things that we would like to be called out, like that sounds like the kind of thing to share with Kevin and Wendy and I, and we will,
maybe we can set the meeting early
Coordinate
October just to
Amy.
have that
yeah, and
formalized.
Stephen was just saying, like, we should, in my opinion, it's a little insane that we're meeting twice a year.
Well, it was once a
It
quarter,
was
but
always-
sometimes there wasn't always agenda items or there was some other stuff going on, so they got rescheduled. But I think the intent is once
Yeah,
a quarter.
As of this year, it's, as far as I know, it's 2 times this year, that's it. And that's not, I didn't have any sense that that was really sufficient or like useful, so I think if we, I don't know the right way to like, I don't know how do we coordinate that.
So I think at that meeting, so if you bring that up, right, because at that meeting, you can schedule the rest of the meetings, and make sure that there are gonna be 3 in the school year, right? Because that would be once a quarter of our school year.
I can ask a pretty basic question, but and maybe this is making the case for a central document, but what are impact fees?
So it's a good question. I mean, city manager will give you a better definition, but basically, when you are looking to develop a piece of property, the city can assess, they do some calculation as to the assessment on the town's resources. And, you know, might be, there's a power, I think there's a sewer impact fee and a water impact, there's a, you know, your impact on schools, and that's a school impact fee that comes, town collects it and sends it to the school. They hired some actuarial guy to reformulate, it was a big presentation at one of these city meetings.
So would it
To
be
figure it out.
fair to say, like, if there's a building going in, they know that there are going to be families living in those buildings, that's going to add or that's going to require the schools to have extra resources, these fees are meant to help with that? Is that how you would think about?
That's how I think it in my mind, I'm not sure it's an official.
Yeah.
But aren't
the
the
accurate
impact
definition.
fees only on net new construction too, not on any renovation? I mean, I don't know anything about the
Yeah,
project you're
I think
talking
you're
about,
right.
but if it's any kind of renovation, that might not even be subject to
Right.
impact fee.
And it's, you know, when they assess them, isn't like, okay, you have approval, go build it. It has something to do with when they get to C of O or something
Right.
like that too, so. It's a little squishy as far as when the money goes in.
The other binder section that I would love to see is transportation.
The budget?
What do you, I guess, it probably sounds like I'm frustrated, I'm not. I just feel like the SAU budget has, so what do you want to see that's not already in the transportation?
Well, it
I mean,
seemed
the
like
SAU section?
when I was looking through the budget last year, I was focusing a lot on transportation. Because those lines throughout the budget seem to be consistently,
Over budgeted.
he doesn't like the word over budget.
Sorry.
But. And so again, that will be an area that I'm likely to focus on really hard to like go through each section and try to find where those transportation fees are, because there's transportation for lots of different things.
Right.
So I'm curious about if we are again sort of in this budget cycle seeing that we're budgeting too much for those things.
So I can, just like with facilities, which I do pull out, I can run a separate report that's just transportation lines, but they'll still be built into the other school budgets.
Yeah, no, I want them in the other budgets, but I would just like to be able to look at them more holistically in sort of the container of itself.
Okay.
We're gonna stop and before Tim gets more work. We've given him.
Well, maybe just a couple of things I want to say,
Okay.
not related to the budget,
Yes.
but just so you know, we're scheduled to have our audit of these books next week, kind of why I wanted the DOE 25 finished this week. auditors come in and they just go over our books. And then that would next be, there's an engagement letter that I need Amy and the board chair to sign, if you don't mind. It just authorizes them to audit our books. You should just know, I don't know if you know this or not, Katie, but we are getting a separate audit this year for food service from the state, and they've picked on Mount Lab. So it doesn't affect anybody in here, but the state, once every so many years, audits your books separately from the financial audits, just on food service. And they'll be in here, they'll be looking at the menu, they'll be looking at everything. Conspiracy theory says because they don't live in the kitchen, but that's what.
What did they say? What did?
Because we don't have a kitchen.
No, they know it's a new kitchen, so they're coming over. I don't know. They just randomly picked it, they said. But anyway, that's going on in our department. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Okay, so that's, we don't have any unfinished business. That moves us on to new business. So first we'll do discussion on the process and timing for creating the academic year calendar. Karen. Oh, sorry. It's like, Karen. Karen.
Hi there.
Sorry.
Yes. I'm Karen Dubois. I'm the District Director for Equity Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. I've been asked to provide you with a brief overview of the timing that we follow as we generate the academic calendar for the year ahead. I'll provide a brief summary and then answer any questions you might have. Beginning in October, I collaborate with the superintendent to create a draft calendar. We adhere to the requirements for students in terms of the school year set out by the state and the Ed 306 requirements. We look at the provisions in our collective bargaining agreements with our employees, and we create a draft. In November, over a period of several weeks, we vet that draft with various stakeholders, including our SAU leadership team, building leaders at all 4 buildings, and representatives from, the leadership of the relevant unions. Often we find some minor errors and we fix them, we make adjustments as needed. In December, we share our draft calendar with the Education Committee for, again, review and discussion. And then in January, we usually receive the Hartford School District calendar. We need to create our calendar in alignment with them because of the Hartford Area Career and Technical Center programming that our high school students participate in. Once we have that calendar, we make any adjustments to our draft calendar that are necessary. We create a finalized draft calendar to present to the school board for approval. That's an overview of the process, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Can you talk a little bit about the provisions in the collective bargaining agreements? Because some of those are date specific, right?
Sure. Our LEA agreement, that's our agreement with majority is our teachers. We're not able to begin the school year prior to August 25th. That's a significant factor, so we can't start earlier than that. We could start later than that. Those collective bargaining agreements delineate the number of days that employees will work during the school year, so that also then eventually tells us our end date for employees, which may differ from the end date for students, which again, that would be laid out per the 306 guidelines. Is that enough information? There are some additional provisions that I can go over.
And how many professional development days are built into those collective bargaining agreements, if you remember?
Great. A provision of the LEA agreement is that at the start of school, prior to the start of school, we have at least 2 teacher preparation days during which leadership will not hold meetings. So those are pure sort of protected teacher preparation days for teachers to come into the building and do what they need to do to be ready for their students to arrive. In addition to that, logistically, we find it useful to have at a minimum 1, but ideally 2 additional in-service days before the start of school. Typically, one of those is a district-wide collaborative learning day where we provide programming for the entire district, either related to professional development initiatives in support of our curriculum or curriculum development itself. And then a second day is a building-specific day in which principals gather with their teams and engage in really very necessary planning to start the school year, aligning schedules, organizing team members, etc. It is possible to start the school year with only 3 days and then move that district day to a different time, depending on how the calendar falls, when the 25th is, and when Hartford begins. There are years when we may need to do that.
Thank you.
Yes. And along with that too, don't the collective bargaining agreements also stipulate parent-teacher conference days as well in there, I thought?
There are 2 parent-teacher conference days when school does not take place for students in grades K through 8. Our teachers work that day. We provide professional learning opportunities for our paraeducators who are not involved in the conference on the early dismissal days. Again, some paraeducators are still working because our high school has school that day.
And one more question. So you talk about aligning with the Hartford school calendar, but not all the days line up one for one. So how do you decide and differentiate between the days that don't line up?
That is a great question. It's worth noting this is my first full year engaging in this process, so I came on board last year at the start of November, and the calendar had already been in its preliminary draft form, so I ushered this process forward alongside my colleagues from then on. So my experience, limited as it is that because we need to vet our calendar with so many stakeholder groups, and we have differing constraints. We're in a different state, and we have different collective bargaining agreements from Hartford. It's productive for us to develop a pretty solid draft in advance of knowing what their district is doing. So it doesn't always line up perfectly. Having students who need to attend class a little bit earlier than their peers because they're attending Hartford by a day or 2 is fine. Students whose vacation maybe begins a day earlier from their Hartford-related classes relative to ours is fine, but we don't want to see big misalignment. For example, our February breaks really do need to line up. Our April break needs to line up so that we don't have our students in school for an entire week when their peers are not, etc. So that's the reason that it doesn't line up perfectly.
And, I mean, I get the idea that Hartford is attending and we might miss a day, but don't we also provide transportation for
We do,
kids?
in those,
So if we are in session and, I mean, if they are in session and we are not.
we're
then
providing transportation to our
provide
students on those
transportation
days.
still On those days.
That's accurate.
So I have a question, because last year I asked, we were talking about the days and when we start, and so just looking ahead, it looks like the 25th is a Sunday.
Yeah.
So if we do the 2 days plus 2 days, that would potentially say that we would start on a Friday.
Yeah,
We
we
wouldn't-
won't.
we wouldn't do
we
that,
won't do
right?
that. We've had a little, in part because I was coming to speak with you fine folks today, we had a nice little quick look at that and thought, a little bit of digging has told me that there have been years when we've started the school year with only 3 professional days in advance of students arriving. So that would be the 2 teacher protected days, which are embedded in the CBA, and then an additional day for building leaders to meet with their building and a very brief all-district gathering. We would then embed that other professional learning day somewhere else in the calendar.
Okay.
We'd have to have discussions about how to accomplish that. It could be at the end of the year, it could be mid-year.
And there would be no, like, there's no discussion ever to just start after Labor, like, to be able to give you.
Yeah, I looked into that. We have started school after Labor Day. It's unlikely that that would align well enough with the Hartford's the Hartford calendar for that to be a good option for us going forward, although maybe it would.
Yeah.
We, again, wouldn't want to create a week of difference there. It would be really difficult to reconcile.
Yeah.
But it's a possibility.
Yeah.
Thanks for the overview. I think I realize there's quite a few constraints. I think one thing I just want to express is, feedback from sort of my cohort of parents is that, sort of the schedule as it lays this year, it sounds like perhaps next year, starting on Thursday, right? And then ending the school year, it seems like on a Tuesday or something like that is challenging for, working parents. So as much as we can, starting either full weeks or nearly full weeks, again, I don't know if that's allowed within the constraints, is much appreciated, again, how that, and so that burden doesn't necessarily fall on parents necessarily, trying to figure that out.
I appreciate that comment, and I did do some thinking knowing that that had been a challenge for families in the community this year. And talking with colleagues in other districts, I think it's, ideally we would create a calendar that would work really well for our families in addition to our employees and our students. Feedback from teachers is that it's actually a gentle way to start a school year is sort of a 3-4-5 start. 3 days the first week, 4 the next week because of Labor Day, and 5. So a silver lining of beginning before Labor Day is often that we're able to do a 3-4-5 start. It eases students back into the school year, and most faculty feedback reflects that that's productive for our students and also doesn't leave families with an entire week to find childcare. There is a 3-day week at the beginning, which maybe is suboptimal. That's probably what we would choose to do most years. There's going to be odd years like next year where that's plainly going to be difficult or impossible. So we'll do the best we can, and I think it's worth mentioning. One of the reasons that our in-service days mid-year don't align with Hartford's perfectly is because we have chosen thus far to have those in-service days take place on a Monday so that families have a 3-day weekend and a 4-day week, rather than other area schools, including Hartford, have their in-service days take place on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Thursday, which may pose an additional burden on families that we try to avoid.
I have just a couple of quick points about as you go forward in this calendar, looking at the past year's calendar. One thing is, we know there were a bunch of revisions that were made at the board meeting where this happened, so I understand why this might have occurred. But this particular calendar has no legend. So there are colors and numbers and letters that correspond to things, and there's no legend for what those things mean. So that is, could we not do that?
That's a great point.
Let us have a legend. The other is we list no school and early releases on certain days. We don't include the early releases for the high school during finals weeks, both first semester and second semester finals weeks. And so, especially for people who are going into a high school, like from middle school, no one knows that that is a thing, right? And suddenly children are leaving school at 11 o'clock. So if we could include those early release days as well, those finals weeks, that would be helpful.
We'll take that into consideration, and I did know that was also something that had been brought up to us in digging a little bit into that, just so that you know, and we can sort of think this through. Those are really not considered part of the district calendar. They're a school-specific calendar. They affect only one school, and snow days can adjust by a day or two when finals week starts. Right. So that can create just additional confusion. I think historically that's why it's been communicated via the LHS calendar and weekly newsletter. So they feel pretty confident that they're good about communicating that in advance to families, but we'll think through how we do that in an intentional way. It may not be embedded on the district calendar because of that, but we'll try to make sure that families know about it at the start of the school year and at least approximately when that will take place.
Right, well, I will say to that point, we did actually get that this year, which was new. We did not get that last year in advance, and I did appreciate that. It was the both for the finals and the midterm calendar. It was part of the weekly, I think last week, or the principal update, so that was,
yeah.
That's great, that's helpful feedback.
And I think also, when we're looking at these two categories that we have, no school / early release or important dates, under important dates it has pre-K conferences and pre-K conferences, and under early release it has pre-K conferences. There's a lot of duplication going on in these groups, so let's just be more intentional about what goes where. Because I think if we're going to put it on the calendar, let's make it make sense, right? That is as cohesive as we can make it, I think would be helpful. And that would give us more room for a legend, just FYI.
That's great. And just again, we have not begun to build this next year's calendar, but this is good feedback, and again, we'll have lots of opportunities for vetting drafts of it. A legend does seem pretty important.
So last year there was also lots of conversation around what holidays we would sort of articulate. Are we choosing still not to this year?
Conversation hasn't continued beyond that conversation that you were part of last year. So I'm sure the conversation will continue. I don't really have an update for you on that.
Okay.
And I think the last point, and this is, and maybe this is just, I don't know if this is a way to address it in this calendar or not, and maybe this is something we need to address in another kind of forum, and I'm not sure what it is. I think the days and the hours that we include on the calendar is sort of meaningless to most of our parents, right? Like, why are we, what are we talking about days, what are we talking about hours, and why do they not correspond, right? So either we don't need to have those on there, or we need to have a full statement of one, or we need to have some kind of explanation somewhere else that says, hey, let me explain to you why we're doing this, because I think it really is just extra.
But I think it's good for the board.
Yes, yes.
And so we
Yes.
can just take them off when we actually.
So the print area did not include that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, so it
I
just,
think that's-
again, I think that
I
it's
noticed
useful
that too.
information, I think it's very helpful, and I think it's obviously state mandated, so we need to know all of those things. But is this where we need to have more information, or do we need to have more information somewhere else? That's just, I don't know, answer to that question.
It seems to me there ought to be a calendar with details in a supplementary document for the board, and then a family-friendly calendar that's out to the community.
And I think too, when we get it, it would be helpful to have like the highlights of the CBAs that you're looking at. Also, if we're saying we're trying to align it to Hartford's, if we can also have a copy of their draft, just so like we're understanding how some of these dates are.
Yeah. And there are years, just so that you know, that Hartford, for whatever their internal reasons are, including last year, releases their calendar quite late, which delays our process. We have, I think, historically a good relationship with them, so we'll hopefully get information in a timely way. But
Okay. And so just to go on to the family-friendly information when it's presented to us is the number of assumed built-in snow days because of the hours. I know there used to be a footnote to that, but even to have a discussion, because I was surprised last year, I think when it was up to 7, I think was what it was so high, so that people can plan when the last day is, or once we've started to have 5 delayed openings or 5 snow days, we may have to extend our school year, just to start socializing that conversation.
right. And I think there was, just so that you know, there will always be, not always, for the moment, the state regulations are that we'll build in 5. We had enough hours to allow for 7, which was only became relevant because we had such a wacky weather year last year. So.
I don't think every parent is aware that, especially people that are new starting in the district, that the calendar does already have some cushion in there for snow days, because not every district and every state does it that way, so.
Yeah, and I think pursuant to our earlier conversation, I think wacky weather years are gonna be our norm, right? So.
It does seem like we need to plan for heat and snow
Right.
and
make it as transparent as possible what we decided to do in the event of heat and snow, because it feels like they're going to both happen, so.
it's a good point. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments on calendaring? Okay.
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. All right, brings us to the delegate assembly for the New Hampshire School Board Association. I guess is, or do you want to say something about the delegate assembly?
Go for it.
Thanks. So the New Hampshire School Board Association, which is our lobbying body to the legislature, has a meeting once a year where they have representatives from all the school boards come and talk about what we want them to lobby for on behalf of us with the legislature. And so we, as a school board that is a member of the New Hampshire School Board Association, send one voting delegate and one alternate to a meeting, which I now cannot remember what day it is.
It's in October.
Yeah, it's October the 14th, I think, whatever that Saturday is. There's some school districts have presented proposals, and we'll get those proposals in advance, and whoever the delegate and the alternate are, they will come and tell us what the proposals are, and we will take a stance on the proposals so they can vote on our behalf for these lobbying proposals on this day in October. So we need to elect an alternate and a delegate, an alternate and a delegate for the delegate assembly, and we also need to have a motion to authorize them to vote on our behalf to the extent that they feel like they understand what it is that we want. So that's why we
they present to us what it is that is going to be voted on, we take a stance on that, and they write it down and they vote for that, but then at the assembly itself, changes can be made to proposals, new proposals can be proposed, and so we have to authorize them to vote in the way that they think this board would act, and usually they have a pretty good sense of that.
We usually will get a summary of the proposed lobbying efforts, the proposed resolutions in a couple of weeks. With the New Hampshire School Board Association board, its own board, their recommendations as to how the Congress, I think that's the word they use, should vote, what their recommendation is. And then and it has a good rationale usually as to why their explanation is what it is. And then we've had a conversation amongst this group, sort of, do we agree with that recommendation, or do we want to vote contrary to that?
And sometimes we have.
Yeah.
So sometimes we accept the recommendation of the New Hampshire School Board Association board, and sometimes we feel like that recommendation doesn't support our local interests in the way that we would like to, and so we vote a different way. We will decide all of that together when those proposals come out in the next week or so. They should be coming out. So it is on October 4th, no, that's wrong. I'm in 2024. I was looking ahead. It is on October 14th, Saturday, October 14th. You go to Concord, you meet in a hotel, there's breakfast and lunch. It probably takes about, from breakfast to lunch, 3.5 hours to do. Anyone is invited, so any board member can go, whether you're the delegate or the alternate or not, if you just want to know how the process works. But the delegate and the alternate, we're contractually obligated as part of this school board association to have someone. So what we're doing tonight is we're going to entertain nominations for someone who wants to volunteer to do this, and we will elect them, and someone who wants to be an alternate, and we will elect them. Steve and I have both done it in the past as we've traded alternate and delegate. Did you ever do it? Yes, Wendy has done it in the past. Mary, did you ever do it? No. Okay, so if you have any questions, we have the answers, but we just need to decide today.
I'd be very interested in doing it if people are looking for someone to recommend, perhaps.
Excellent.
Well, just having, I think it might be useful to, and maybe we think about this as a board here, how we choose those, that maybe it's worthwhile having someone from, one of the two delegates maybe be a returning member, and then the new delegate be the alternate, and then the following year, it's almost like a president-elect kind of situation.
Yeah, I think it is helpful because we were both new our first time, and we just kind of made stuff up as we went along. And in fact, we did not have this vote to authorize, the board didn't have a vote to authorize us to act on their behalf, which is something that we didn't know that we had to do. And luckily, we didn't have to make any changes to anything that would have mattered, but immediately came back and said, for future reference, we need to be doing this. So yeah, so Steve has volunteered. Does someone want to be, so you would be the primary and the other person would be the alternate, and the new person, yeah. Does someone else want to be the alternate?
I can be the alternate if nobody else wants to.
I nominate Steve to be the delegate and Tia to be the
Excellent.
alternate.
Okay. All right. So moved by Jessica and seconded by MJ. All those in favor? Excellent. Unanimous. Thank you very much. And then also we need a motion. So you make the motion for.
Well, do you want to do that now, or do you want to do that when we get the proposals?
We can do it then. It doesn't matter. Let's do it now, so it's just done.
So then I would move that the board authorize its representatives to this delegation to vote on matters that we haven't yet discussed as a board in a way they feel represents this board's wishes.
Yep.
So we need a second? Okay, moved by Steve, seconded by
Got it?
Mary.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
No math.
That was very concise.
I said the NHSBA delegation.
NHSBA delegation.
Specify the delegation.
Yeah, NHSBA delegation. All right, all those in favor? Okay, excellent. Thank you guys for volunteering to serve. Appreciate it. Good breakfast and lunch, I like. Okay, moving on. So we're not doing these.
Right, we have 3 items here that were from policy that are still with policy and being reviewed by legal. Our attorney was not able to turn that around, so Wendy and I will be working on that and getting that forward.
So that's C, D, E, and F,
Correct.
correct? Okay. All right, so we're moving on to G, discussion acknowledging the $500 donation.
Do we-
from
do we-
excuse
Can
me.
I ask just a,
Yes.
should we table because they appear on the agenda, or are we?
Yes, let's table the discussion
Okay,
and action.
so
on those
I'll
policies.
make a motion to table discussion and action on the first readings of policy CFA, GBEBE, IJL, IJLR.
I'll second
Okay, moved by Wendy, seconded by Stephen. All those in favor? Thank you. Make it legal. All right. Acknowledging the $500 donation from Hyannis Air for the LHS Science Olympiad. Do we have any background information on that?
Just that we have $500 donation by Hyannis Air for the Science Olympiad for the Lebanon High School.
And as you know, last year, our Science Olympiad was first in the state. Our Science Olympiad team was first in the state, so this will be, help them to continue their winning streak. We don't need to have any action on that, we just acknowledge.
What's the limit, Tim?
Is it
Or we
500?
have to,
Or we have to have action?
Yeah, I missed this looking at the agenda earlier. Now, with the new policy, you need to approve anything above 500, so you need to make an action to approve this.
Above 500 or 500 and above?
500 and above.
Okay, all right, just want to make sure.
It's not 501.
Okay, so we need a motion to approve this donation.
I'll make a motion to approve the $500 donation from Hyannis Air for the LHS Science Olympiad.
And second by Steve, okay. Any other discussion?
thank you.
We acknowledge them and we thank them for their donation. All those in favor? Thank you. All right, next, acknowledge a $2,000 donation.
Or we need a vote for a $2,000 donation from the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation for the Science Olympiad for Lebanon High School.
All right. Yes.
that. I move that we accept the $2,000 donation from the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation for the LHS Science Olympiad.
Second.
All right, moved by Steve, seconded by MJ. Once again, we'd like to thank the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation as well for their generous donation, and we're hopeful that it will lead to more winning Science Olympiad. Can we get all those in favor? Okay, excellent, thank you. And last, $1,000 donation.
Sure, we have a $1,000 donation from the Byrne Foundation to Lebanon High School Nordic and Cross Country Ski, which will go towards dues and fees.
Great.
I move that we accept the $1,000 donation from the Byrne Foundation for the LHS Nordic and Cross Country Ski Team.
Moved by Steve, seconded by MJ. And once again, we want to thank the Byrne Foundation. The LHS Nordic Cross Country Ski Team is one of our biggest teams in the district, so we're grateful for all of their donations. So all those in favor of approving this donation? Thank you.
Can I just ask a general question, Amy? Are these donations solicited by?
I would need to look further into it. I believe they, for the Byrne Foundation, that they.
We're submitting some kind of
Yeah,
request.
yeah.
Usually, these donations are solicited.
Okay,
There are some, like the Hannaford's money, that every so often we'll get a check from Hannaford's, and we have in each school, there's a principal's donation fund, and so if we get something like from the grocery store, Hannaford's in particular, that's not really designated something, it'll go in there, and it's for, I know principals bought glasses for a kid or whatever, so, but usually these are solicited for specific reasons, so, yeah.
and do they cover items that should be budgeted?
That was where I wanted my detailed accounting of how else we support our teams.
I mean, I think that's in the eye of the beholder. You
Yeah.
know, Science Olympiad money, you know, last year, I think they went to like a national competition. And so they raised the money and didn't cost the taxpayers anything, you know. That's in the eye of the beholder, so, you know, the ski team goes up to Canada every year, that's mostly covered by the
They
budget.
actually don't go to Canada anymore, but,
Oh, well, they did for a while.
yeah.
That was covered in the budget, you know, not donated, so.
No, they have to pay.
Well, I think kids pay, yeah. Well, all I know is I pay the bus drivers out of our budget. So, I don't know, I mean, that's up to you, is, And we can give you, I mean, we have hundreds of student activity accounts, and so maybe I can try to use my discretion to figure out the major ones you guys are worried about and show you what they spend money on. You know.
Well, I know that you've said in the past that, like when it comes to fundraising or types of fundraising that we do a good job covering, our budget is good. So if we have our Nordic team soliciting donations for dues and fees, I think the question is, are we covering? Or what are other ways to do some of the things that these teams need? I don't know, I was just curious.
Well, yeah, I think it goes to how much are the taxpayers supporting athletics and co-curriculars, and how much are we getting it through donations and fundraising and other aspects? So what is the total cost of running these programs? I don't think that we have a good handle on that as a board.
And there's always one-offs. Remember, you guys a bunch of years ago approved wrestling as you have to be an organization for 3 years, I think, before it gets funded. So they raised money to buy mats, because you can't wrestle without mats. But we can't fund something that you guys haven't made a real sport yet, so that's a one-off. It's just an example that pops to mind. Sometimes there's weird things that come up.
Okay. All right, did we vote? Did we vote? Yes, we did vote on it. We did. Okay, so that brings us to the thing we added to the agenda, which is Mary and Tia are gonna give us a quick update on some legislative issues that are happening, and they included, or handed out a page about that in the packets.
You want me to? Sure. Okay. So these are just, obviously, you can sit and think about, you don't have to make a big decision about every single item. But my idea was, I know there will be the delegate assembly, but if we want to as a board, also just send a letter on our own to legislatures throughout the state of New Hampshire on different topics. And so I thought the beginning of the school year could be really meaningful. They are presenting legislative ideas right now for the session. So it might be running a little bit late for this session, but still, if we can get the process going for this to be a continuous thing each session, have the whole board involved in it. I know that my ideas, my values, my priorities, whatever, will not always align with the whole board, but we can always just bring things in. If we don't agree, it does not have to move forward with anything, but we can have discussions. If you guys want to add anything, delete anything, you know, just have this process. I think we talked about maybe every other meeting, having a discussion about legislative issues that the Lebanon School Board may want to have a voice on with the legislatures. Some of these ideas were brought to me by people from the public in Lebanon that they wanted to see the Lebanon School Board speak up more on. So it's not necessarily a whole bunch of background on it, assuming that these legislatures already know the backgrounds. But it's, this here has more about what are you doing to address this issue? Do you support this? If you don't, why not? Can you explain this? And trying to get more of a back and forth conversation and dialogue with the state legislatures in New Hampshire as it pertains to our students here in New Hampshire. So that was kind of one of the big ideas, right? Now this first thing with PragerU, it's coming forward to the board tomorrow. So if you do want to talk about that tonight, I am planning on going down to Concord. If you guys would like me to speak on behalf of the board or not, I can speak on behalf of myself, right? And I will do that. But I wanted to present it to the board also if you guys would want me to present it as from the Lebanon School Board.
And just for background, that for those of us who don't know, that when things go before committee or go before whoever, everyone has a chance to testify,
as parents, as school board members, as business owners, whoever it applies to. This board, our particular legislators have told us often that they wish that we were there more often, testifying on behalf of things that had effect for us, or against things that affect us as a board and as a school district. So this is a way to actually have that happen more frequently, which I think is useful, because a lot of things get decided and then we have to deal with the effects of those things, having never expressed an opinion or attempted to say, well, wait, this isn't going to be the best thing for us, or we really, really do like this thing and we like that we support it. So I'm glad that Tia and Mary are taking this on.
And also with the PragerU, at least for me, I don't want to speak for Mary too much, but I tried to stay away from bashing it for being conservative or doing anything in terms of, conservative, liberal, blah, blah, blah. I was worried people have heard that and they'd gloss over, but I focused with this statement much more on the quality of the education of these videos, not being up to snuff, not being an accredited institution, and very much the quality of the education for New Hampshire students, and not necessarily it's created by a conservative group, because I think that's already being said. And as a board, I was hoping that would be a concern for the board, regardless of political affiliations, anything like that, but really focusing on these students as board members.
So can you tell me who's using it?
PragerU.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Florida.
Florida is, and was it Oklahoma just passed it? And New Hampshire is passing it.
New Hampshire's passing.
Not passing it,
Or
sorry,
considering it.
discussing.
Just that one course, but
Using the cash course. It's for financial literacy. It's 15 5-minute videos that are overstimulating, information dump, pretty low quality, not produced very well in terms of if you know about education and how these students will not soak it in. There's also concern from some teachers that they do have a worksheet at the end of the videos, but it's not actually graded and will not affect if you get that credit for the certification for financial literacy. So when you compare that and saying, oh, this is just as good as a semester-long course with comprehension checks throughout, it's just not the same.
Right.
And if we truly want New Hampshire students, not even just Lebanon, but New Hampshire students to truly have that ability for financial literacy, this is not going to help it. They're not actually going to retain that information. It's too fast, it's too overstimulating for most people, and it's just not enough. So that's kind of what this focused on too.
I think also one thing you might want to mention from a school board perspective is that this creates an equity concern as well. That if we are asking certain of our students in public education to pay attention to a financial literacy course in a class as a course, and that's fulfilling the requirement, then we are having other students doing a wholly different kind of experience, and I think there's been some question about who's paying for this, who's taking care of it, where is this funding coming from, and so I think it creates equity issues that are troubling from a public school standpoint, from a state-funded school standpoint.
I'll say I think it would be useful or hopefully beneficial for us to come out on statements where we can agree and speak as boards. So I think that's great. Like for PragerU, for example, in this case, I'd like to be able to do some homework right before I get on board with something. So if there's a way, I realize this comes up tomorrow and getting this initiative going, but I think it's a great idea, and if we can get in front of this such that we can come to it with a little more background, that would be excellent. I don't know how you do that.
I think that's what Tia's trying to do, is Tia and Mary are trying to get ahead of it to sort of get the conversation started. This is just an urgent one that.
So the NEA, the Superintendent's Association, the Principals Association, they're all going to speak tomorrow, to speak out against this, not only for their curriculum piece, but I think some of the inappropriateness in their way of teaching, not just particularly with this course, but the courses that are listed right next to it that any student would have access to.
So it seems really weird that there would be something going through that isn't accredited.
Well, it's learn everywhere with the Department of Ed, you can get a credit anywhere that applies with the Department of Ed, so that door is open and the horse is out of the barn, as Tim.
And that's actually, so this is not directly related, but the next, the 306 revision, so the Education 306 talks about what are the minimum requirements for schools to provide for an education in New Hampshire. And there are a slew of revisions that have been proposed for those guidelines. And many of those revisions are along the lines of anything can count as a credit, right? Like that it really opens the doors for anything to start to count. And so that's sort of another issue that,
yeah, we could add in.
and it's not happening right this second, but it is soonish.
Yeah.
So Amy, when you get notified through your associations and stuff like that, that this stuff is being chatted about, I mean, so I think to Kevin's point, like where do we begin to, I mean, I've heard some of this just through the news and stuff like that, but where, like how can we start to get access early to things that are being talked about that seem like they're becoming big issues?
I should include that in the superintendent update for something for consideration for this group. Our group in the Superintendent's Association we have a delegation going down just to speak. And they too have decided to speak on the equality of the education piece and is trying to avoid that political argument. But there's really not matched to competencies that we, the students deserve to know and understand, especially for financial literacy, which is such an important component of our learning.
Yeah.
I also think that we need to invite the legislators from this area to come to our meetings every once in a while to tell us what they see coming up the road, so that we can talk about it ahead of time.
But Amy, maybe through some of your channels, you have access to a lot of information, and probably a lot of people that are doing a lot of background research on this. You know, if you ever have the opportunity to share some of what you're hearing and collecting,
Sure.
you know, your vast experience and resources could be very useful to all of us.
Absolutely.
So what do we do as an entire school district for financial literacy? Do we have?
Of course, yes, you have to have a course now, the state law is that you have to have.
But that's brand new.
Standalone, I believe
Well,
Lebanon
we
had
have
that.
a unit right now.
Right,
We have a unit in a course, so there's discussion about.
how to build that out into your full course.
Got it.
And a lot of it, people have it within health, there's different components, economics.
Because I know there is a class at the high school, because one of my children took it, but
It's not,
the other one didn't get it, so.
you have to be required to offer it, it's not a graduation requirement.
I see. Got it.
I think that's a great idea. I think also, Steve, to your point, if you're interested in a lot of these things, following Reaching Higher in New Hampshire is a good place to start, because they do exactly the kind of research and pointing to resources for people that, you know, you can follow them on Facebook, or you can just get on their newsletter, and that helps a lot because it helps you to sort of see what's in the pipeline. And
You
there's
can trust
several.
what you read on Facebook.
No, I post what I read on their website, but they also post it on Facebook. So, but they also publish on Facebook with sources, which I love. So, but there are other couple, and they have other organizations that they partner with that are informative as well. So a lot of it is going through things like that. And again, some of these are more political than others, right? So they're left-leaning, but they're definitely like sort of, I find them to be very clear and less partisan than other sites. So we need to decide if we want to make a statement on behalf of us, on behalf of the school board at this hearing tomorrow. What are your thoughts? Does someone want to make a motion?
Should I make the motion?
You can make a motion.
All right, so I will move to, would it be, giving me permission to speak on the board's behalf in regards to Prover U being accepted as financial literacy course in the state of New Hampshire.
Or not accepted.
Or not accepted.
Not accepted.
Yeah.
Not
Sorry.
accepted.
All right, maybe somebody else needs to make that
Not accepted.
Okay, all right.
Second, yeah.
Okay, so moved by Tia, seconded by Mary. Do we have any additional discussion?
Right. I'm open for discussion.
Well, I'm just gonna echo Kevin's point that I think that it's kind of hard, and I'm a little uncomfortable not being so prepared to make a decision on this. However, I also think though that this was a good summary write-up, and just on the two key points that they want someone to have something that's a non-accredited university, and that it's just all done through video learning without actual written grade work at the end, concerns me enough that I'm comfortable not voting on this tonight without
And
having
just-
a fully informed decision.
That's what I figured, focusing on that would be easier instead of focusing on that it's conservative and the other courses that are not.
Oh, yeah, and I appreciate that, I think that is the correct approach, is to
Trying to be
politics
diplomatic
out of it.
here.
And get with the, you know, the true impact.
I
of
have
this.
my own thoughts, but I can do that when I speak on my own behalf.
Right.
I think the other piece that is important to express is that we've got to be careful of the precedences that we're setting. So like, if this is a doorway into all kinds of other, you know, whether it's
Less clutter,
PragerU, but it's,
I agree, and I wasn't sure how the board would feel about me adding something like that in, because yeah.
I like Will's comment about the equity
Yes,
concerns too.
I wrote that down,
Yeah.
yep. All right, so, and the precedent about, oh, yeah, because they do have access to go down the rabbit hole, right, of all sorts of concerning videos.
So can you explain to me the equity, because I don't quite understand that, because if everyone would be required to take this course, then where does the equity come?
It wouldn't be a requirement.
The requirement is that the school has this course, has a course to offer.
Right, so I could just log on as a student, finish the videos and do my paperwork and submit it and hand it to Ian at the high school and say, here, give me, I think it's a half, is it one credit or half credit, how many equal? Yeah, a credit of, on there, and we have to accept it on our transcript.
So the equity then comes against the person that took the semester-long course?
Right, we
Okay, okay.
Right.
And
That's the
learn
part.
something.
Right, and learn something. Right.
Forget about learning.
Right, so that it it's an extra burden on some students that other students don't have to have, which, you know, doesn't make sense. From my perspective.
And some parents may not recognize the value of an accredited institution, and then their children are then suffering for not having good financial literacy, and that becomes a generational issue, instead of addressing people understanding truly how to manage money. And so that's concerning. It kind of,
It affects people
for
in
me,
both
like, you know, it's really hard to get out of poverty, right? And education and knowing that is helpful and making them feel empowered, but this could be stealing that opportunity from some students whose parents may not know better, right? In terms of accredited versus not.
So there's equity issues on both sides.
Right, right.
All right, we've got a motion on the table, which we're not gonna read back.
So has anybody seconded it?
Yes, Mary
Oh,
seconded.
Mary seconded.
So basically that Tia, we're allowing Tia to, or authorizing Tia to go down and, to testify on our behalf as the Lebanon School Board, following these points plus the points that we've added.
Yes,
Yes.
Speak in
yeah,
opposition.
Speak in
to
opposition.
speak in opposition
Opposition to the
with these
proposal.
points, not adding a bunch of frivolous
Yeah.
stuff.
Yes. Okay, so all those in favor? Okay, all those opposed? All those abstaining?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay, all right. That's
I
fine.
understand abstaining, I think you have
No.
much of it
And I
is.
think if we have this on, so I guess in practice going forward, I do think it's helpful to have the summaries of particular issues. Having them obviously before board meetings is helpful with the packet, it's helpful.
I didn't actually get one in my packet.
It wasn't, it was.
Okay.
Yeah, it didn't get it
That's
until
why I said
later.
Oh. I was like,
And
I don't see it.
And including links or whatever to
additional information beyond the summary, so people can follow it if they need to, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would be good, because my hope is also that you guys can have this to think about it and add, do whatever you guys want, so we have links.
One of the questions I have when we think about our process too, will we ever have any listening sessions with our constituents around this, you know, just so that we make sure, I mean, we may have we may as a group sort of philosophically agree, but that may not represent all voices in our district, so how do we?
So I think if we know that we're doing this regularly and it's gonna be published on the agendas, right? Then I think we can say that those kinds of conversations can happen during public comment at the meetings in which we're gonna be discussing it. So as long as it's in enough, we weren't able to do that this time, but in enough time, I think that's plenty of opportunity for people to weigh in if they so choose.
We may get more people showing up.
Exactly, which would be great. So yeah, I mean, I agree. I think we do have to have people weigh in most of the time, and that's been our goal, I think. So then the next time that we'd be doing this would be not this next meeting, but the meeting following that, and we'll just put it on the agenda.
That can help with the transparency also,
Yes.
that we just have it out there and it's routine.
Absolutely.
You know, one of the other things that you can do, or whoever's preparing these summaries, is, you know, there's usually it's available online, the link to where you can go and submit comments. You can testify essentially remotely. You can submit comments to those proceedings. So the more that we know about that in advance, we can sort of attend remotely and at least express an opinion too.
And also like have those links accessible to our constituents so that if they want to offer a differing, that they have that opportunity. You know, I think you need to make sure.
They usually have a thing of like, I oppose, or even neutral.
And maybe just some explanation for people as to how to do that.
Yeah, we can do that. That sounds good. So we can include those links on the summary of the next.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you, guys. That's really helpful.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to committee updates. Finance and facilities.
We have a date.
You have a date.
We have a date.
Okay.
We are going to meet September 20th at 4:30 at LMS.
Okay.
Did you say December?
I said September. Tomorrow, next Wednesday, a week from today.
Okay, I like that. Thank you. And then at that meeting, if you could set the meetings for the rest of the year, that'd be great.
We have a tentative
That could be
schedule.
tough.
We're
try
working
harder.
really hard.
All right, keep trying.
We have a plan.
Okay. Policy committee met on Monday, September 11th, and the summary of that, the minutes of that meeting are in your packet. Does policy want to tell us anything else from the meeting?
I don't think so. No, I think the minutes are probably very clear, as they usually are, and we'll speak more specifically to the policies when we actually have them in front of us.
And then reach out to School Board Association for that training, so he.
Yeah, so,
He's got jury duty, but he's gonna check with me tomorrow just to make sure that
okay,
it's clear.
so we are hoping to have a workshop kind of thing around policy process. And I'm assuming that because it's a workshop type thing, policy is definitely going to that, but I think it's open to the rest of the board. I would think it would be.
It'd be a non-meeting because it's training,
Yeah,
like a retreat.
and he's an attorney, so.
Yeah.
But I think if others want to attend, it seems like it's a continuing ed kind of thing for us, so.
Okay, just let us know when that's going to be. Thank you. Education committee met on Monday, September 11th also. Would you like to share? The minutes are also in your packet.
I think the minutes really summarized it really well, so. Did you need to have
Karen
some-
also had emailed me
The PowerPoint, yes.
So I don't know if you want to include those in the minutes or not. I tried to get that to happen last year, but it didn't work.
No, I think they should be, so
I
if you
think
can make
so.
a link to in the minutes or send it, or tell Lori to make a link in the
Okay.
minutes, that'd be great. That'd be
Thanks.
cool. And just going forward, and yeah, that is a good point, Mary, that I forgot to mention. For for all of the committees, if there are presentations or PowerPoints or whatever, ancillary documents of whatever kind, if we can link to them in the minutes, that would be helpful, so that whoever is reading the minutes actually gets a full understanding of what we cover. So maps, all of those things, if we can just link to them, that would be great.
The other thing that was in, Karen provided us with a little beginning and a calendar, which are in the notes on the reaccreditation of the high school. So I kind of gave a calendar for what's going to happen this year alone. So, but it's a 3-year process.
Yeah, so the accreditation is for 23 to 26.
Right.
And then they're accredited for an undetermined amount of time. I can't remember how long it was. I guess 10 years.
10 years.
Staff's been working hard.
Yeah.
Getting ready for it.
Right, okay, thank you. So the next meeting for that is Monday, October 2nd. PNN is still TBD. SWAC, the next meeting will be Wednesday, October 4th at 3:30 at the SAU office. HACCTC is meeting next week, Tuesday, September 19th at 10 a.m. Area committee is meeting in October, Tuesday, October 17th at 6 p.m. The school and city task force, we talked about already, is meeting Thursday, October 26th at 6 p.m. Are there any future agenda items, board member recommendations, or questions?
I just had a reminder, next week, on the 20th at the middle school, we have a training with Jim O'Shaughnessy and our principals and administration, and just communication relationships with building principals and administration with the board. So I will order dinner for everybody, and we'll have a fun evening.
And that's at the SAU?
That is at the middle school in the library.
And it's at 6 p.m., right?
6 p.m.
Okay. And any other future agenda items, board recommendations or questions? All right, and so other important dates, our next official school board meeting is Wednesday, September 27th at 6:30 p.m. back in the LMS cafeteria, correct?
Correct.
Yes. And we're grateful to Katie and MLS for hosting us here today and for touring us around. We appreciate that. And Steve.
I'd like to move that we adjourn.
Oh, great. I'll second a second. Second by MJ. All those in favor?